I have a habit that I think quite a lot of people share, but few really want to admit. I tend to stay up late. Not just occasionally, but the kind where I know it's not good, yet I still do it. I know I'll be tired the next day, but I still stretch it out, just a little longer. At first it's only a few minutes. Watch one more video. Read a few more lines. Scroll through a couple more posts. And then when I finally look up at the clock, it's already 1 a.m. The funny thing is, at that moment there's still a very rational voice in my head. You should go to sleep. You have a lot to do tomorrow. Staying up late isn't good for your brain. I know all of that. But my hand is still holding the phone. My eyes are still open. And my brain still wants just a little more. And if I'm being even more honest, staying up late sometimes actually feels pretty nice. The night is quiet. No work messages. No one asking anything from you. Everything slows down. It becomes one of the rare moments in the day where you feel like you're finally alone with your own thoughts. Some people call this revenge bedtime procrastination, delaying sleep to reclaim a little time for yourself. And honestly, that explanation makes sense. After a long day of work, studying, and dealing with all kinds of responsibilities, the night feels like a small reward. The only problem is, that reward usually comes with a bill the next morning. You've probably experienced it too. You wake up. Your head feels heavy, almost like it's stuffed with cotton. Your eyes are dry. Your body feels sluggish. Coffee doesn't work as well as it used to. Your focus drops. Even normal tasks suddenly feel harder. At that point, people often say something very familiar. It's just because you didn't sleep enough. But after reading quite a bit about neuroscience and sleep biology, I realized something surprising. Staying up late is not just about sleeping less. While we think we're only sacrificing a few hours of sleep, a lot of complex things are happening inside the brain. Some critical maintenance processes get delayed. Certain biological systems fall out of rhythm. And a few regions of the brain start operating, not quite the way they should. What makes it tricky is that most of these things don't happen immediately. Your brain doesn't break after one night of staying up late. Instead, it's more like a house where you keep postponing cleaning and maintenance. One night is fine. 2 nights are manageable. But if it happens hundreds of times over the years, the cost eventually starts showing up in places you wouldn't expect. So the question becomes, if staying up late is actually harmful, why does the brain still allow us to do it? And what is really happening inside our heads when we say, just one more episode, just a few more minutes, just a little longer and then I'll sleep? To understand that, we have to look at how the brain works when night falls. And the story is far more interesting than I initially thought. When I first started seriously learning about sleep, one thing surprised me quite a bit. Sleep is not simply turning the system off. The brain doesn't shut down. In fact, while we sleep, the brain is busy doing a series of extremely important maintenance tasks. If we simplify it a bit, during the day the brain is like a city operating at full capacity. Information is flowing everywhere. Neurons constantly send signals. The nervous system processes decisions, emotions, memory, and reactions. All of this consumes energy. And like any city that runs continuously, it produces biological waste. In the brain, this waste includes molecules like beta amyloid, misfolded proteins, and byproducts of metabolism. If these substances accumulate too much, they begin to interfere with how neurons function. It's like trash piling up and blocking the streets. And that's where sleep comes in. During deep sleep, a fascinating system in the brain becomes active. Scientists call it the glymphatic system. You can imagine it as the brain's nighttime cleaning crew. When we sleep, neurons shrink slightly. The spaces between cells expand. Cerebrospinal fluid flows through the brain more actively. This fluid movement washes away waste products and clears the brain. In other words, nighttime is when the cleaning crew works. But if you stay up late, the cleaning crew can't start work on time, or it works far less efficiently. And that's only the first part of the story. Another system that gets affected is the circadian rhythm, the body's internal clock. Inside the brain there's a tiny structure called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, SCN. It sits in the hypothalamus. This is essentially the master clock of the body. It regulates when you feel sleepy, when hormones are released, when body temperature drops, when the brain prepares for rest. One of the key hormones involved here is melatonin. When darkness falls, melatonin levels begin to rise. It acts like a gentle signal telling the brain, it's time to shut things down. But light from phones, computers, and room lighting can trick this system. The brain thinks it's still daytime. Melatonin release gets delayed. Sleep gets pushed back. You may think you simply don't feel sleepy yet. But in reality, your biological clock is being shifted out of rhythm. There's also another mechanism that makes staying up late hard to stop. That's dopamine. At night, when you watch videos, scroll social media, play games, or read stories, the brain receives small but continuous dopamine rewards. Not extremely strong, but enough to make you want just a little more. One more video. One more article. One more round of the game. The brain loves these small rewards. The problem is that dopamine can make you feel temporarily alert, even when the body desperately needs sleep. It's like driving a car when the fuel gauge is already near empty. The car is still moving, but the system inside is under pressure. So when we stay up late, three things are happening at the same time. The brain's cleaning system is delayed. The circadian rhythm becomes disrupted. Dopamine keeps us artificially alert. And when these three factors combine, the brain is still running, but it's no longer operating at its optimal state. What's interesting is that during that moment, we often don't feel that anything is wrong. Sometimes we even feel surprisingly awake. So why does the brain seem to trick us like this? And why does that "I feel fine at night" sensation often turn into a terrible morning? The answer lies in how the brain handles energy, emotions, and decision-making when it's sleep-deprived. One interesting thing about staying up late is this. At the time, you often feel completely fine. Sometimes you even feel sharper, like your mind is moving faster. I've experienced this many times myself. It's 1 a.m., sitting in front of the computer, and somehow the focus feels better than during the day. Ideas start flowing. You work continuously. At that moment it's easy to think, maybe I'm just someone who works better at night. But the next morning, everything feels different. Your head feels heavy. Your focus drops. Decisions take longer. Even small tasks start to feel irritating. So why does nighttime feel productive, but daytime becomes the price you pay? The answer lies in how the brain allocates energy and regulates emotion when sleep is lacking. One of the first areas affected is the prefrontal cortex. This part of the brain is responsible for self-control, planning, focus, rational decision-making. You can think of it as the manager of the brain's entire system. When you sleep well, this manager works efficiently. But when you're sleep deprived, its performance drops significantly. At the same time, another brain region, the amygdala, becomes more active. The amygdala is involved in emotions, fast reactions, and threat detection. When the prefrontal cortex weakens and the amygdala becomes more active, the brain starts functioning differently. Less rational, more emotionally reactive, harder to control impulses. That's why when people don't sleep enough, they often become more irritable, more anxious, more impulsive in their decisions. One well-known study showed that after sleep deprivation, amygdala activity can increase by around 60% when reacting to negative emotional stimuli. In simple terms, the brain becomes overly sensitive. Small things suddenly feel bigger. An email that sounds slightly harsh. A comment that feels slightly rude. A small mistake at work. Normally you'd ignore it. But when sleep deprived, it hits harder. Memory is also affected. During the day we constantly absorb new information. But to turn that information into long-term memory, the brain needs sleep. During deep sleep, the hippocampus and cortex transfer data from temporary storage to long-term storage. Without enough sleep, that process gets disrupted. You may still study, still read, still work, but your ability to retain information drops significantly. That's why many students stay up all night studying, yet remember surprisingly little the next day. Another subtle effect involves the brain's reward system. When sleep deprived, the brain becomes more sensitive to quick rewards. Sugary food, short videos, social media, anything that delivers instant dopamine. Meanwhile, tasks that require long-term effort, studying, deep work, focused thinking, become harder. So a cycle can easily form. Stay up late, right pointing arrow, sleep less, right pointing arrow, brain gets tired, right pointing arrow, self-control weakens, right pointing arrow, seek quick rewards, right pointing arrow, stay up late again. A loop. The dangerous thing is that this loop doesn't knock you down immediately. It happens gradually. You still go to work, still live your life normally. But over time, energy, memory, emotional stability, and focus slowly begin to decline, without you clearly realizing why. However, there's a very common misunderstanding here. Many people assume the solution is simply just sleep more. That sounds right. But in real life, the situation is a bit more complicated. Because not everyone can maintain perfect sleep every night. Work, family, life pressure. So the more practical question becomes, what is the real goal when it comes to sleep? Not becoming a perfect sleeper, but understanding the system well enough to reduce long-term damage to the brain in real life.